The town of Red Willow sat like a tired animal beneath the fading sun, its wooden buildings worn smooth by wind, dust, and too many hard years. Horses stood tied along the hitching rail, their tails swishing lazily, unaware of the weight carried by the man who rode in just as the sky burned orange and gold. Tristan Cole slid from his saddle without ceremony. His movements were controlled, economical habits carved into him by years of survival. The long duster he wore hid the familiar outline of twin revolvers at his hips, though anyone who knew the look of a gunslinger could see the truth in the way he stood, still, ready, dangerous. Whispers followed him like dust in the street. Some recognized him instantly. Others felt it in their bones, that cold instinct warning them this man had lived by violence and was not so far removed from it as he wished to be. Tristan ignored them. He had learned long ago that looking at people only invited trouble. He tied his horse, checked the cinch once more, and turned toward the general store, intending to buy supplies and leave before nightfall. He never planned to stay anywhere long. Red Willow was meant to be nothing more than another stop on the long road away from who he used to be. Inside the store, the bell above the door rang sharply. Conversations faltered. A few men stiffened, hands drifting toward belts where guns might rest. Tristan felt the tension, the unspoken question of whether blood would be spilled before sunset. He hated that feeling. "I just need flour, dried beans, and coffee," he said quietly, setting coins on the counter before the shopkeeper even spoke. The older man swallowed, nodding too fast. "Why, yes, sir." Tristan turned away, pretending not to notice the fear. He was tired of it. Tired of being a name whispered in saloons, a legend soaked in blood. Tired of remembering faces that haunted his sleep. Outside, a sharp cry cut through the low murmur of the street. "Please, someone help him." Tristan froze. The sound wasn't fear alone. It was desperation, raw and cracking at the edges. Against his better judgment, he turned. A small crowd had gathered near the edge of town. A young ranch hand lay sprawled in the dirt, clutching his side, blood seeping through his fingers. Panic rippled through the onlookers, too many voices to little action. And then Tristan saw her. She moved through the crowd with calm urgency, skirts lifted just enough to keep them from the dirt. Her dark hair was pinned up hastily, strands escaping to frame a determined face. She knelt beside the wounded man without hesitation, her hands already pressing cloth to the wound. "Give him air," she commanded, voice steady but kind. "He's losing blood, not hope." Someone muttered, "That's Abigail, the healer." Tristan watched from a distance, something unfamiliar tightening in his chest. Abigail worked quickly, efficiently, her brow furrowed, not with fear but focus. She spoke softly to the injured man, grounding him, anchoring him to life. When the man groaned and squeezed her hand, relief flickered across her eyes. Tristan had seen death countless times. He knew the look of someone fighting to stay alive. What unsettled him was the way she fought with him without a weapon, without violence, believing life could still win. Their eyes met briefly across the crowd. Abigail studied him not with fear, but curiosity, as if she saw more than the guns, more than the past clinging to him like a shadow. Tristan looked away first. He didn't belong near people like her. And yet, as he mounted his horse moments later, he realized something unsettling. For the first time in years, he wasn't sure he wanted to leave. Tristan had intended to ride out before the sun dipped fully below the horizon. That had always been his rule: arrive, resupply, disappear. Towns had a way of digging hooks into men who stayed too long. Yet when the bell from the small church rang out for evening prayers, he was still there. He stood at the edge of Red Willow, reins loose in his hand, watching the healer's cabin across the way. A lantern glowed softly through the window, warm and steady, unlike the flickering lights of saloons he knew too well. Against his will, his boots carried him closer. The door was open. Inside, Abigail washed her hands in a basin, sleeves rolled to her elbows, revealing faint scars, knife slips, burns, marks of a life spent mending others. She didn't startle when Tristan's shadow crossed the threshold. Instead, she glanced up and studied him with those calm, assessing eyes. "You're bleeding," she said. Tristan looked down. A thin line of red traced his knuckles. The skin split from where he'd tightened his fist earlier, without realizing it. "It's nothing," he replied. "Most wounds are," she said, drying her hands. "Until they aren't." She gestured to a chair. "Sit." He hesitated. Orders were usually followed by gunfire in his world, but her voice held no command, only certainty. Tristan sat. Abigail cleaned the cut gently, her touch precise but careful. She worked as though his hands were tools, not weapons, and the thought unsettled him more than any threat ever had. "You're not from Red Willow," she said. "No. You don't plan to stay?" "No." She smiled faintly. "You sound very sure." "I have to be." She glanced up. "Because of your past." The question struck like a misfired bullet, expected and close. Tristan stiffened, jaw tightening. "People usually pretend not to know." "I don't," she said softly. "Pretend, I mean." Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken truths. Outside, a horse snorted, and somewhere a door creaked shut. "They say you're Tristan Cole," she continued. "The gunslinger who survived the Dry River massacre. The man who always walks away alive. They say a lot of things. Are any of them true?" He met her gaze, then fully. "Enough of them," she finished, bandaging his hand, and leaned back. "You don't look like a man proud of it." "No," he said quietly. "I don't." For the first time since he'd ridden into town, Tristan felt something loosen in his chest. Not relief, something more dangerous. Recognition. "You saved that ranch hand," he said. "I helped him," she corrected. "He chose to live. That's not always how it works." Her eyes softened. "I know, but I believe people can choose differently than they did before." The words lingered in the air, aimed straight at him. "I'm not your project," Tristan said. "I wouldn't dare," Abigail replied. "But I don't believe anyone is beyond redemption." A sharp knock interrupted them. A man stood in the doorway, hat clenched in his hands. "Miss Abigail, my boy's got fever. Something awful. I don't know what to do." "I'm coming," she said immediately, grabbing her bag. She paused, looking at Tristan. "You're welcome to leave now." He stood slowly. "And if I don't, then I suppose Red Willow will learn who you are now, who you were." Outside, the night settled over the town. Tristan walked beside her without a word, the weight of her belief pressing heavier than any gun he'd ever carried. For the first time, he wondered if redemption wasn't something a man found, but something someone else saw in him first. Red Willow changed after that night. Tristan noticed it in the small things, the way the shopkeeper spoke, without trembling. The way children no longer froze when he passed. The way Abigail greeted him each morning with a nod and quiet smile, as if his presence had already been decided. He took work repairing fences, hauling supplies, anything that kept his hands busy and his guns holstered. For a while, it almost felt like peace. But ghosts don't stay buried forever. It started with a rider at dusk, galloping hard into town, dust streaming behind him like a warning. Tristan felt it before he saw it, that familiar tightening in his spine. The instinct that had kept him alive when better men had fallen. The rider dismounted clumsily outside the saloon, panic etched into his face. "He's Cumin," the man gasped. "The Black Spur Gang. They asked about a gunslinger, said his name was Tristan Cole." The town went quiet. Abigail was tending a woman's injured wrist nearby when the words reached her. She looked up, eyes searching the crowd until they found him. Tristan didn't move. He had known this moment would come. Men like him didn't simply vanish into good deeds and quiet mornings. Violence had a long memory, and it had finally caught his trail. "They're not here for the town," he said, voice low but firm. "They're here for me." A murmur rippled through the gathered townsfolk. Fear, anger, uncertainty. The sheriff stepped forward. "Then maybe you should leave. We can't protect you from them." Tristan nodded once. He'd expected that. "I will," he said, before nightfall. Abigail pushed through the crowd. "No." Every head turned. "They won't stop. Just because he leaves, she said. Men like that don't look for peace, they look for blood. Tristan met her gaze, sharp and warning. You don't understand. I understand enough, she replied. Running didn't save you before. The truth of it struck deep. He had run after Dry River, after every gunfight, after every body left behind, and the past had followed him all the same. You stay, she continued, voice steady despite the fear tightening her fingers, and the town stands together. The sheriff hesitated. You're asking us to gamble our lives. I'm asking you to trust that a man can choose who he is today. All eyes turned to Tristan. He felt the familiar pull of his revolvers, the weight of the man he used to be rising like a tide. But he also felt something else. The quiet mornings, the healer's belief, the possibility of a life not defined by gunfire. I won't start a fight, he said, but I won't let them hurt this town. That night, the Black Spur Gang rode in under a moonless sky. 5 men, mean, confident. Their leader, a scarred brute named Harlan Crow, dismounted with a grin. Cole, Harlan called. Thought you could hide. Tristan stepped forward, unarmed. I'm done, Tristan said. Leave. Laughter erupted. Harlan's hand twitched toward his gun. The sound of the first shot shattered the night. Tristan moved not in rage, not in hunger for violence, but in defense. The town erupted into chaos as bullets tore through the air. Tristan's instincts took over, but his aim was measured, controlled. He disarmed, he disabled. Only when there was no other choice did he fire to stop a man forever. When it was over, the Black Spur Gang lay defeated. The town still stood. Tristan lowered his gun, breath ragged, hands shaking not from fear but from restraint. Abigail ran to him. Her hands found his arms, checking for wounds. You stayed, she whispered. If I chose, he replied. As dawn broke over Red Willow, Tristan knew one thing for certain. Redemption didn't mean never drawing a gun again. It meant knowing when not to. Morning light spilled across Red Willow, revealing the scars of the night before, bullet holes in wood, broken glass in the saloon windows, and dark stains in the dirt that no amount of scrubbing would ever fully erase. The town was quiet, not with fear this time, but with reflection. Tristan stood at the edge of the street, staring at his hands. They were steady now, though hours earlier they had trembled with the weight of every choice he'd made. He had fought again, fired again, and yet something felt different. The violence had not owned him this time. Footsteps approached. Abigail joined him, her dress smudged with dirt, eyes tired but clear. She held 2 tin cups of coffee, offering one without a word. He accepted it, nodding his thanks. They'll talk about this night for years, she said quietly. They'll talk about the bodies, Tristan replied. That's how these stories go. Maybe, she said. But they'll also talk about the man who stood his ground, so others wouldn't have to. He shook his head. I don't deserve that kind of story. Abigail turned to face him fully. You don't get to decide that alone. The sheriff approached, hat in hand. Town council's decided, he said. You're welcome here as long as you want to stay. Tristan was caught off guard. After everything. Because of everything, the sheriff corrected. You could have ridden out. Instead, you stayed and protected us. The man tipped his hat and walked away. Silence settled between Tristan and Abigail again. But it was no longer heavy. It was thoughtful. I don't know how to live in a place like this, Tristan admitted. Without always looking over my shoulder. Abigail smiled gently, then learned like anyone else. Days turned into weeks. Red Willow healed slowly, but it healed. Tristan repaired roofs, helped rebuild fences, and escorted supply wagons not as a hired gun, but as a neighbor. He kept his revolvers locked away most days, and each morning he woke with less dread than the last. And Abigail was always there. Sometimes they worked side by side in quiet companionship. Other times they talked late into the night, sharing stories, hers of loss and faith, his of regret and survival. She never pressed him to confess more than he could bear. She listened, and in that listening, he felt lighter. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Tristan found her outside her cabin, tending a small garden. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked. She looked up. "Sometimes. But this town needs me." He nodded. "So do I." The words surprised them both. Abigail stood slowly. "Tristan, staying here won't erase your past, I know, but it can give meaning to what comes after." He met her eyes, the truth of her words settling deep. "I don't want to run anymore." She reached for his hand carefully, as if afraid he might pull away. He didn't. For the first time in his life, Tristan allowed himself to imagine something beyond survival, beyond the next town, beyond the next sunrise. He imagined roots and hope. As the stars emerged above Red Willow, the legendary gunslinger felt something unfamiliar but deeply earned: peace. The wind moved gently through Red Willow, carrying with it the scent of fresh earth and new beginnings. Months had passed since the night the Black Spur gang rode into town, and the scars they left behind had softened into reminders rather than wounds. Tristan no longer wore his guns openly. They rested in a locked chest beneath his bed, oiled and cared for, but untouched most days. He rose early now, working the land just outside town, repairing what others couldn't manage alone. The legend of the gunslinger had faded into something simpler: man who showed up when he was needed. Abigail watched him from the porch of her cabin as he approached, a small smile warming her face. Life had settled into a steady rhythm between them: shared meals, quiet laughter, and long conversations under open skies. "You're thinking too hard again," she said. "Habit," Tristan replied. "Hard to unlearn." She stepped closer. "You've already unlearned more than you realize." That afternoon, a young boy arrived at Abigail's door, shaken and bleeding from a fall. Tristan stayed back, letting her work, but when the boy cried out, instinct pulled him forward. He knelt, speaking softly, steadying the child until the fear passed. Abigail caught his eye. That moment, small, unnoticed by most, meant more than any gunfight ever had. Later, as the sun dipped low, they walked beyond the town, where the prairie stretched endlessly, glowing gold beneath the sky. "I used to think redemption meant paying for my sins," Tristan said. "Every mile, every fight." "And now?" Abigail asked. "Now, I think it means choosing differently when I'm given the chance." She slipped her hand into his. "That's all anyone can do." They stopped at the crest of a hill, overlooking Red Willow. Smoke curled from chimneys, and laughter drifted faintly on the wind. It was no grand ending, no thunderous victory. It was better. Tristan turned to her. "I don't know what the future holds." Abigail smiled. "None of us do. But I know who I want to face it with." Her eyes softened, shining with understanding rather than surprise. "Then stay," she said simply. "Not because you're hiding, because you belong." As dusk settled, Tristan felt the final weight of his past loosen its grip. He was no longer the man who lived by the gun. He was a protector, a partner, a man redeemed not by bloodshed, but by choice. And in the quiet heart of the West, a former gunslinger found the greatest reward of all: a life worth living. Enjoyed this Western love story? Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Western stories filled with heart, redemption, and romance.